Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a tale as old as time for you today, except a brand new edition of it. Nintendo hates esports, and they did
That's
it
right.
again. They did it again, Slade.
Yep, they just can't help themselves. Death, taxes, and Nintendo hating people for playing their video games. Slade Byron here, covering the latest shit show and the Nintendo versus mostly Smash, but pretty much all of their games.
Yes, so Nintendo put out, and we will cover bits and pieces of this as we go, but the Nintendo Community Tournament Guidelines. Now, what in the fuck does Nintendo consider a community tournament? Well, I will list that off really quick for you. So we have a baseline, so we know what Nintendo considers a community tournament. Community tournaments are small scale and not for commercial profit. Okay. They may not generate commercial revenue. They can only have up to 200 people for in-person tournaments or 300 people for online tournaments. Can charge at most $20 per person. Cannot have a prize of more than $5,000, and they can charge $15 for an admission fee for in person.
That's right. And there is a slew of other details, but essentially, for the most part, this is basically Nintendo's attempt to target locals as well as regional tournaments
Yes.
that are typically smaller in scale.
Yes, because
Obviously, those are just as important as like majors.
super majors, the max tournaments, because they do have something for the super tournaments, and we will get into that a little bit. But your initial impressions on what Nintendo consider a community tournament.
Well, long story short, they're basically trying to completely and totally take over the scene.
Yeah.
It's not the first time, they attempted to do this, and it's honestly eerily similar with what was going on with the Panda Global last year with Dr. Allen and that shit show that we covered on this channel.
Yeah,
I think a
God.
little over a year and a half ago at this point.
I think it's closer to a year ago, but yeah. That entire fiasco, but yeah, and now these local tournaments, these regionals, I guess, are like the bigger ones that would get hit from this. They can't have sponsors.
They cannot have sponsors. This is what really hits a lot of the local scenes pretty hard, because without having local sponsors, it's really hard for them to get venues for these tournaments.
Yeah, like
for people to be able to attend, unless they charge fees for people that come in, which the limited fee and prize winnings and whatnot also hurt that. Yeah, because if they can't pay venue fees because they can't charge people playing, then essentially tournament organizers have to pay pretty much everything out of pocket, which already happens in a lot of our local scenes. What makes this especially super fucking scummy egregious is essentially there's absolutely zero reason for Nintendo to try to do this other than the idea that they just want to completely control everything involving the esport and their IP. It's not too dissimilar to the playbook that League of Legends and Riot Games did when that esports scene was at infancy, where Riot essentially shut down virtually every single tournament and esports event. Yeah. And then branded everything under, their banner like LCS and everything else internationally, etc.
Yeah, or a recent example I saw someone bring up was I think Capcom was doing some stuff in 2022 with Street Fighter V.
Yeah. So the difference between obviously Capcom, Riot Games, and Nintendo is at the very least, Capcom and Riot Games understand for an esports team to blossom, you have to put a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
And Nintendo doesn't do that. So
Yeah.
the reason why this is terrible is basically they're essentially pushing for the same level of power that those companies have over their esports scene without spending any dimes outside of the inevitable lawsuits that they're going to have when they go after people.
Yeah, because some other ridiculous stuff. And you said something about IP control earlier. And there are some funny notes. Community tournaments not affiliated with Nintendo and make no use of Nintendo trademarks or IPs except the following, or except as permitted. And the names of the tournaments may not include Nintendo trademarks or IPs such as Nintendo's company name, logos, product, or services such as game titles, shortened versions, etc., which...
Yeah, so for example, if I wanted to run a local tournament, in Dallas, Texas, I can't run it as the Dallas, Texas Super Smash Brothers Ultimate Tournament.
Yeah.
Because that infringes on their IP.
Yeah.
I can't use any character logos. I can't use any fan art of the game itself or of any Nintendo IP in general. So essentially, when it comes to advertising these tournaments, I have to be extremely vague as to what it is.
Yeah.
And basically makes it absolutely impossible. And then obviously it can't be sponsored and it can't be shown that Nintendo endorses it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and another big thing in terms of just like the organizers, as they call it, TOs, as it's commonly referred to. So they can't, they have to disclose all accounting related to the cost of hosting the event promptly, including entry fees, admission fees, and prizes distributed by posting them on a website and or social media accessible to everyone, which that's a very interesting one to put in there.
I think that is pretty interesting. Like, there's a lot of like really cringe stuff that they have in here. They have to disclose exactly, how they spend their funds. They can't pay players or fly players out. It's actually strictly forbidden.
Yep.
They can't, pay employees of any kind. So you can't play. You can't pay
commentators.
Commentators. You can't pay TO. Pools captains for like the smaller parts of the tournament. You can't pay employee. I mean, essentially, for what I'm understanding, is if you have a big tournament at like a stadium or whatever, you can't even go as far to pay employees of a company to run that business like they normally can.
Yeah, well, that
while they serve people participating in the Smash tournament.
Well, keep in mind, for like locals and like regionals, of course. Like what for the big tournaments though. And,
the big tournament is where things get really crazy.
So, because I have a very funny thing pulled up because it's out in Japan right now, the application for individual permissions for gaming tournaments. So for corporations, for organizations, they will have to apply through this website that I have open right here. It's out in Japan, and I'll get more into that in a little bit, why that's important. It's not out yet in the US or in Europe. But for this, I will just go game tournament for charity, have the page pull up, and a very interesting point to be made here. Game titles to use, and guess what, Slade? What games are on offer? We have Nintendo Switch games. Think of the big ones, like Smash Ultimate, Super Mario Party, Splatoon, Mario Kart, 1-2 Switch, if you're feeling froggy, I guess Ring Fit, if you want to get them fat people in the community in shape. But it's basically only 4 Switch games. which I think is also a very important thing to make. At least as of right now, you have to apply for permission for each title if you're doing multiple titles. Pokemon games have their own thing you got to deal with. And for retro titles, nah, you can't do retro titles under this. Which is absolutely crazy that they didn't even consider, retro games. Because I know, like, a lot of Smash tournaments, they have Melee. That's the big one.
Melee is the big one.
Sometimes, like, at Super Smash Con, they have, like, Brawl. They have 64. They have Smash 4. So, but yeah, that is the application as of right now. It's very bare bones. It's simple. You have multiple options for, like, charity events, for all your particulars. And what do you think of it being Switch games only right now? No retro stuff. No retro stuff, which is kind of wild.
It feels intentional because let's be real. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Nintendo's always had a bone to pick with Melee in particular.
Yeah.
Because they have this very misguided view that people who play Nintendo's older titles don't buy Nintendo's newer titles, which to me is
that's false.
I don't know what the words I'm looking for are, but essentially it's really dumb. It's a really dumb take. But at this point, the evidence points to that Nintendo believes that statement to be a true one.
Yeah. And the thing I'm surprised at when I looked through the game list, they don't even include like their own games on Nintendo Switch online that you could feasibly do either online or at a local event.
Yeah. So
that kind of
now Smash is obviously the big number one community that these guidelines seem to be pointing to, that they're trying to essentially control, because let's be real, it's the only real major esport.
Yeah,
amongst all the titles.
Yeah.
But this doesn't just affect esports, because this is a general community event as a whole and their branding. We have a very good tweet from Mario Kart Central.
Yes.
That had to make a statement on this based off of, one, obviously their name. But as well as like their guideline for Mario Kart tournaments that they run and stuff like that.
Yeah, because they run competitive Mario Kart tournaments ranging from free-for-alls to team events. And it's gonna be very interesting how they handle it. Because, like, Mario Kart is probably out of the, I would say, like, 5, maybe, games that have Nintendo eSports in the, or I guess 6, if you want to count Pokemon. Out of probably the big 6 that really have, like, Nintendo eSports, it is probably the 3rd most popular. Or maybe 4th.
Yeah, coming after Smash and Pokemon.
Yeah,
for sure.
And, one other thing, Slade, that I think it's ahead of Splatoon. The Splatoon Tournament Organizers Guild also put out a statement. They were more optimistic. They're like, to quote them, "We are not worried about these changes, and you should not be worried either. All organizations will operate as usual, and we believe that these changes will not significantly impact us. We will continue to monitor the situation and adapt accordingly to handle changes if and when necessary." And they're not happy with Nintendo stepping on grassroots communities they haven't otherwise supported, which, that's
pretty much true for both Splatoon and Smash.
Because, like, those are, because outside of Pokemon, those are, like, the big two. Because Nintendo does support Splatoon in Japan. So, a surprising amount more than people think.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's just one region. And, Byron also pointed out a couple of examples of a couple of regional tournaments in Japan.
Yes.
That got approved pretty much within the day.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah, so...
we have the Sumibato tournament series and the Kamui tournament series. Byron's probably going to go ahead and pull up the tweets and go over them for you guys right now.
Yep, so... Kamui applied for the application from Nintendo for the next tournament scheduled to be held, was successfully granted. They'll continue to apply permissions, and Mr. Nojiko made an a international tweet, and shockingly, Sumabato received the license for 10 tournaments. Seems that there will be no problem for us to hold more future tournaments. So what I'm curious about, and I don't believe he answers this, is this 10 licenses for each tournament, or is this like one license for the set of 10?
Yeah, that was something that I found pretty fascinating to try to figure out, because we don't know whether or not it's a 10 tournament series or just 10 individual tournaments, or you have to apply for a license every single tournament that you do.
Yeah, and do you have to pay? Do you have to pay?
Yeah. And not only that, but like the biggest concern with this, because these are 2 Japanese tournament series. So I imagine, there's no language barrier there or anything like that.
Yeah.
They didn't specify whether they went to a website or if they just emailed Nintendo support and then quickly got through it.
I would assume, like I showed on screen, they went to the site. Since that site is up now, I was able to access it, so I assume they went through the website. So, but who knows?
I do know that typically when it comes to applying for these licenses, I know historically the creator of the Summit series, as well as the Big House and some other series, have been ghosted in the past when they've applied for these without getting a response.
Yeah.
The Big House, notoriously, their response was the cease and desist because of the use of Slippy during the middle of the pandemic. But
that's an interesting one. So, like, maybe they have like quickened their pace in all regions, because it's not set to be in effect in the US and Europe until November 15th, which is in about, I want to say like in about 3 weeks from when we're recording this episode. So we'll find out then if like maybe like Japan, if you apply for a license in the US or Europe, you'll get one relatively quickly. Or will it be a long, drawn out process where you get ghosted? Who knows? That remains to be seen.
All right, so now that we've gone over, a lot of the specifics, obviously we didn't cover literally everything.
Yeah.
We honestly did really cover what tournament rules will be for, people who actually are licensed by Nintendo.
Well, yeah, they don't say. I will say
they don't include any of it.
I will say I don't think they would be subject to the participant cap. I don't think they would be subject to the fee limits. I don't think they would be subject to the dumb rule. Oh, and I'm trying to find it. It's a dumb rule about, like, you can't sell, like, food or drinks.
Yeah, I'm hoping that a lot of these rules that they've included for their quote-unquote community tournaments are going to be not included as rules for Nintendo-endorsed tournaments, as I'm going to call them. Beyond their licensed tournaments.
Yeah, licensed tournaments, yeah. And about the name part, I don't know. They'd probably be fine, because most tournaments aren't really like named after Nintendo IPs. You just listed off a couple of them, including like the Big House. That's a big name.
Well, I mean, that's for like majors and whatnot, which think about Super Smash Con, which is probably one of the top 3 most popular tournaments people go to every year.
That one's a little bit iffy. I don't know if
because it's not just a tournament series, it's also a convention of all things Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah. So that one I think would be a more unique situation. I'm a little surprised they haven't been cease and desisted yet, but who knows? Maybe they'll have to change their name. They probably aren't subject to the prize pool cap. I would assume, like, for some of these, it's like the basic, like, hey, ensure the community is safe, must ensure health and safety, create a friendly environment. You know, the typical, like, hey, don't be a douche, make sure people are safe, make sure people are of age, all you know, all that usual.
Yeah.
The usual stuff every tournament should have.
So essentially, now let's talk about like the nitty gritty and the most important part about this, which is the locals. So the reason why a lot of this is like really terrible is because essentially under these guidelines, you won't be able to hold charity-based tournaments. You won't be able to hold massive online tournaments. For example, Coinbox, which is a Smash Ultimate online tournament that Hungrybox currently runs, get a lot of entrants as well. It's also sponsored by a
Coinbase.
Yeah, Coinbase. That was what I was trying to say.
I believe Hungrybox made a meme video from his Twitch stream of he was like, I'm gonna keep running it every week until Nintendo ceases and desists me.
Yeah, the Ludwig approach. Until they cancel me, I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, which fuck them. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets one within the first month. I would honestly not be surprised about that. Unless maybe he applies for a license. But again, we don't know what the price of the license is. We don't know how quick Nintendo will be, at least in Europe and the US. So who knows on that?
The Sumabato TO posted some details because ESAM asked some questions. He asked if the license cost anything, and he said there's no need, which I'm guessing he means that there's no need for money, so it's free.
There's no money. That's a new wrinkle to the story.
But keep in mind that this is a Japanese tournament. We don't know what the rules and the process is going to be for Western tournaments.
But like, it's been the same rules for the most part across the board, except in Japan, like, you can't do cash prizes, but that's just Japanese law already. So, like, that's really been the only, like, differential between, like, all three, like, rule sets that got put out. Because it was first on Tuesday, because this happened yesterday when we're recording this. Japan put their rule set out. Then a couple hours later, Europe put out their rule set. And then a few hours later after that, the US put out their rule set.
Yeah, so
and it's mostly the same.
To do unilaterally.
Yeah, so I would think if it didn't cost anything for the Japanese TOs, I don't think it would cost Europeans or US TOs anything. So
yeah. So
but what does this mean?
For our local scene here is we're actually sponsored by McDonald's, like a local McDonald's here.
Oh, McDonald's franchise.
Like at McDonald's, it's at the college.
Yeah.
But if we lost that, we would most likely quickly lose our venue.
Yeah.
Followed by like
just losing the scene.
Our current series. And they're gonna have to rename the series too.
They
follow the guidelines.
What's the series name currently?
But I don't want to give.
Fair.
I don't want to dox myself, to be completely honest with you, because it's our city and then Super Smash Brothers Ultimate Tournament.
Okay. Couldn't come up with anything better, I guess.
Yeah,
and a lot of scenes are probably like that, to be honest.
That's like 90% of scenes.
Yeah,
I feel like every now and then you have some that come up with a nice little creative name, like Shield Breaker. Which
that's a really good one. That's a good
and
one.
And then like stuff like that. But let's talk about our thoughts and opinions on it now that we have covered the facts.
Yeah, that's the facts.
Byron, I'll go ahead and let you start because I have a lot to say.
Yeah, it sucks, of course. Like most other companies that deal in the esports world don't do this. It is Nintendo, though. They are one of the most they're in some ways they're more controlling than Disney or like Viacom. and you know, like especially Viacom, at least in terms of like YouTube history. Viacom were the motherfuckers that changed YouTube forever. But to be more restrictive with your IPs than Viacom and Disney says something. I get it to an extent. They want to protect their IP, obviously. You know, speaking out when that happened in 2020, all that stuff. But Yeah, like this to me feels like a half measure because the only tournaments this is really going to hurt, I guess, in the grand scheme of things are your locals and your regionals. Like
But
little Timmy can't run his 20-person event at a college dorm trying to make like money for like so he doesn't have to eat damn ramen.
yeah, and to be fair, this isn't going to affect the majority of local scenes because let's be real, most locals
They're not going to
are
give a
capped
shit.
at 200 entrants, and if locals are like sponsored for like whatever reason, um, Nintendo would have to go after literally everybody, which
Yeah, it's like I bet
that's gonna be like damn near impossible for them to do.
yeah, like I bet with this like application and this esports initiative stuff, I bet for each region they probably don't have that many people working on it, to be honest with you. That's just my gut feeling. And it'd be a waste of time, effort, and money to try to go after every little Timmy and Sarah trying to TO just local events where they have maybe 50, 60 people maximum. Or maybe
Yeah.
sometimes 100 if it's a bigger city, like maybe a New York City, a Los Angeles, a Chicago, a Miami,
Yeah,
a
or
Houston.
like more, circuit examples, the tri-state area, Georgia, like where the scenes are really thriving.
Yeah.
But even those don't reach 200 entrants on the regular, at least outside of the game's releases.
Yeah.
Where like it's all like new and like super popular and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
and then,
again, this is just, now, as always with Nintendo, you never know how the situation's going to change.
Yeah, change and unfold. Yeah.
We're going to
yeah.
hear a lot more about this when a beloved major series doesn't get licensed for whatever reason.
Yeah, that is definitely a possibility that could happen. I was going to make that point, actually, that, like, there's probably going to be at least one major that we hear about that, for whatever reason, doesn't get the license. Which,
yeah,
I'm expecting that, like, we're covering that, like, that week or the week after on the show. That, like, oh, hey, this major didn't get their license. Apparently, Genesis 10 is still happening.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's because they're going through the licensing process and they've just figured it out, or because they've already had it planned so many months in advance that technically falls within that timeline.
Oh,
before November 15th when they roll it out. Because like, well, we planned it long before November 15th. It technically be considered retroactively trying to apply it.
Yeah, because there is that clause that I believe it applies for tournaments, I think, like, scheduled or, like, have announced stuff before 2024, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I imagine that Genesis X, even if they don't get licensed, would probably be safe.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of other questions that people have that we're just not going to know the answer to until something happens. And the one thing in the tournament guidelines that has people worried about, because even if you follow all of the guidelines, Nintendo also stuck in a tiny little clause at the end that may not be used for community tournaments that involve anything that Nintendo deems inappropriate.
Yeah, gotta throw that vague terminology right there.
Mean anything.
Yep.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, at this point, Nintendo is just like basically flexing their IP and their power in this situation. Like I said, it's ultimately these guidelines are pretty horrible.
Yeah,
but I don't think they're enforceable on a large scale because let's be real, I feel like a lot of community tournaments are ultimately going to ignore the majority of these, like not being able to sell food or water
or merchandise.
Or merchandise. That's already not going to fly at the majority of locals that are held in restaurants.
Yeah, like I know
like that.
Yeah, and I know like I think Esam in his video were like, "Oh, maybe the wording is that it's the tournament itself and not the venue, but it's vague enough that it could be considered the venue instead of just the tournament organizer selling food, drinks and merchandise. So
Yeah, because there's absolutely like zero shot that they could enforce people buying food and drink at venues. Now, if it was like the tournament organizer bought 1,032 packs of like bottles of water and started selling them at $3 a bottle, then I imagine they're gonna be like, no, you can't buy that. What the hell?
Yeah, like
you can't sell those.
Yeah, so obviously it sucks for Smash. It sucks for the Mario Kart scene. It sucks for Splatoon. I think at least a few, if not some, organizers in the locals or regionals are just gonna say, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm out of here. This is too much. Either they're just gonna be done, or if there's another game they're passionate about and think there's a community there for, they'll try. I'm not saying it'll happen. I'm just saying maybe that's a thought.
I feel like
process.
That's somewhat of a wishy-washy take, especially when it comes to Melee. Like, let's be real. If there was another game that Melee players could and would be passionate about that wasn't Melee, Byron, bro, they would have been found at it by now.
Well,
like, they would have already moved on.
Well, some people play multiple games.
I mean, so like not everybody's left and can hack it at a high level in multiple titles.
True.
But genres of fighting games.
But it's like, and for players, will it be worth it to even go to some of these events anymore if they follow these rule sets? You know?
I mean, I don't think this is good. Like at first, it was really easy to react and be like very doom and gloom about it. But again, this is one of those things that like there really isn't a reaction to be had until, like I said, a beloved major series that everybody loves and goes to suddenly gets canceled. And
or
let's be real, people are still gonna run tournaments online for both Smash Ultimate as well as like tournaments on Slippy and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I don't think they're stopping
anybody.
Yeah, but and who knows? Maybe they actually do send cease and desists to regionals, and if they do, that's a pretty good scare tactic, I would say, to be like, all right, we're fucking out.
Because those aren't considered like major tournaments for the most part, but they like usually include multiple scenes coming together for like a large scale tournament. They're essentially like mid majors, or like very small scale majors, like. Typically, Midwestern scenes all come together and, hold those and whatnot.
Midwest, Northeast, the South, the West, those typical regions. But, like, I think...
Even then, I imagine, as long as the process for applying for these licenses are painless, there shouldn't be any issues. But, again, we just don't have that information until
like, November.
Where, like I said, until a major series gets fucking canceled because Smash is just like, no, you can't run this.
Yeah, or a bunch of regionals like get the axe for whatever reason. But like I thought I had to take it first, but the more I thought about it and the more I've watched like Hungrybox and ESAM and other people talk about this, I'm like, okay. Like I personally am not like that invested in the Nintendo eSports scene, but I want it to like continue to exist.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm personally invested because I played Smash competitively, and I traveled to lots of local, regional, and major tournaments back when I was playing.
Yeah, so like
obviously, I'm very passionate for this scene, and I want it to succeed.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll let that passion flow through because honestly, my stance is the fence sitter stance for once, I think, on this. I don't really have an opinion, but maybe that will change once we actually get more info in mid-November. But Slade, show your passion, I guess.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get too into it. Long story short, these guidelines are absolute dog water. They're basically trying to tell people how to run their community events.
Yeah.
And basically trying to dictate how a grassroots scene is ran. They're terrible. They're dumb. They're naive. They don't have any form of understanding what goes into organizing these things.
Yeah.
Or the amount of not just money, but also time that people sacrifice to get these put together and whatnot.
Yeah, I've heard stories, and it can be a Herculean task sometimes.
The amount of scenes that lose money running these locals just to make them run, just purely out of the passion
and the love
that
of their
they
game
have for their game. That now they're essentially being told, no, you can't fucking have any form of, monetization whatsoever outside of a $20 entry fee, which in a lot of regions and states, that does not cut it.
Yeah.
So essentially, your tournaments have to have 0 winnings, which higher level players aren't going to attend your tournaments if there's no, winnings, because then there's no stake for people to show up.
Yeah.
Or essentially, you're not going to pay for venue fees, which at that point, somebody's going to have to eat that when they want to hold their tournament at any, public place that isn't somebody's basement or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't allow people to pursue esports as a full-time job, which that's already a problem.
Yeah.
Nintendo being on the fence one way or another isn't going to change that.
Yeah, because the state of
they're getting in the way of people trying to make that a reality.
Yeah, even though, look at the state of esports, the venture capital money leaving, all the crypto sponsors basically leaving, except Coinbase,
Yeah.
No.
The state of esports is not great right now for sure. But long story short, this is ultimately terrible, but at the same time, it's not doom and gloom in the sense that Smash is suddenly dead or whatever, because in the end, I feel like this mostly just applies to or they're mostly going to try to apply this to large regional tournaments and majors.
Yeah.
They can't go after every little Timmy that runs a local.
Yeah, every little
runs a high school or charity tournament or whatever.
Yeah. They can't get little Timmy and Sarah.
Not possible.
Yeah.
Because they would have to have tens of thousands of lawsuits, and that just covers tournaments for a month across the US. That's not counting the hundreds of thousands of tournaments that happen in the US every year.
Well, I guess to be fair, Nintendo does have that fuck you money.
Yeah,
I guess, but that would be a waste of their money.
They're gonna have to sue literally everybody in the fucking player base. My friend.
Or I guess they would have to sue enough to leave an impression and be basically, it's you'll obviously still have people that will.
They would have to make an example out of somebody really smart and financially ruin them.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't know. Smash fans are a different breed.
Yeah, God, yeah, they are a different breed.
To be completely honest, I don't think that this is going to slow down the community. And as long as the licensing issues go very smoothly for Western tournaments and majors, we will continue to cover the story if something crazy happens, Shine gets canceled because Nintendo decided not to license them, or some big major series gets canceled because Nintendo's haha, no, your license application will not be accepted. But a lot of those third-party apps like Mario Kart Central, or sites like Mario Kart Central and whatnot, are gonna have to probably rebrand. I think that's the biggest thing in all this, which could be absolutely crazy. But fingers crossed. I'm actually optimistic that things are going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see what will happen in the future with other Nintendo, with just Nintendo esports that aren't Pokemon, I guess, in general.
Yeah, I don't want to be too optimistic though, because again, the tournaments that did get applications sent very quickly are Japanese tournaments. And typically that's never been an issue due to their laws already covering things like prize pools and gambling and stuff like that.
Yeah, but also they had
Western tournaments that are going to be the tell of whether or not this is going to be an issue or not.
And we'll find out when the applications open for the US and Europe. So
but I think that's going to be just about everything for this episode. We weren't gonna cover, anything for last week or this week because probably the news have been dead. But with this being, the biggest, news drop we had this week. We felt like we just needed to talk about, get a video out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I know Byron and I at some point are going to put out a Super Mario Bros. Wonder review.
Yeah, like a review discussion, because I'm currently streaming that over on Twitch. I'll be finishing up the main game probably on Saturday, so expect that episode on Sunday, where me and Slade just talk our thoughts on Mario Wonder.
Yeah, that's right. And naturally, as we get more gaming news, you can find a nice compact version of all of them here at Who the Hell Asked.
Yeah.
But anyways, this has been Slade.
And this has been Byron. Hope you all have a good day. Good night. And goodbye.